Shadows in the mansion, Edmund Blackwood stared at the spreadsheet on his tablet, the numbers blurring before his tired eyes. The quiet of his home office was absolute, save for the occasional creak of the century-old mansion settling around him. 3 years had passed since Amelia's death, yet sometimes the silence still startled him. How could a house with 2 7-year-old girls be so utterly quiet? His intercom buzzed, jolting him from his thoughts. "Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Harrison is here to see you." The voice of his household manager. Giles was formal as always. "Send her in," Edmund replied, straightening his posture. Patricia Harrison had managed his household staff for 15 years. The gray-haired woman entered with her characteristic efficiency, hands clasped before her. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Edmund nodded. "Yes, I understand you found a replacement for Mrs. Winters?" "Indeed. After interviewing several candidates, I believe Ms. Valentina Mendez would be most suitable. Her references are impeccable, and she has experience with children." "Fine. When can she start?" Patricia hesitated. "Tomorrow, sir." "But there is something—" "If you've vetted her, that's sufficient." Edmund returned his attention to his tablet. Discussion concluded. "Very well, sir." Patricia lingered a moment longer than necessary before departing. Closing the door with a soft click, Edmund sighed, removing his glasses to rub the bridge of his nose. Mrs. Winters' retirement after 12 years had thrown a wrench into the perfectly ordered system of his household. The elderly housekeeper had been discreet, efficient, and most importantly, understood that the twins required structure, not coddling. Penny and Paige needed stability after losing their mother, not someone who would disrupt the careful routine he'd established. Later that evening, Edmund made his obligatory appearance at dinner. The dining room was cavernous for just 3 people, but Edmund insisted on maintaining proper habits. The twins sat silently at the table, identical in their Navy school uniforms, their dark hair, Amelia's hair, neatly braided. "How was school?" he asked, the same question he posed every evening. "Fine, Father," they answered in unison, their voices small. The rest of the meal passed in silence. Edmund noticed Penny pushing her broccoli around her plate, but said nothing. Paige kept her eyes downcast, occasionally stealing glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking. After dinner, Edmund retreated to his study while Giles supervised the girls' homework and bedtime routine. This was how it had been since Amelia died, a perfectly orchestrated dance of minimal interaction. Edmund told himself it was for the best. The girls reminded him too much of what he'd lost, and he feared his grief would only burden them further. The next morning, Edmund left early for a board meeting, barely acknowledging the twins at breakfast. By the time he returned home that evening, darkness had settled over the estate. As he entered the grand foyer, he paused. Something was different. Sound. There was sound coming from the east wing where the girls' rooms were located. Not crying or arguing, but something he hadn't heard in this house for years. Laughter. Clear, unbridled, childish laughter. Frowning, Edmund followed the sound. As he approached the playroom, a space filled with expensive toys that rarely saw use, the laughter grew louder. He stopped at the doorway, stunned by the sight before him. The twins were sprawled on the floor, giggling uncontrollably as a woman he didn't recognize acted out what appeared to be a story, complete with exaggerated voices and dramatic gestures. The woman had warm bronze skin, her curly hair pulled into a messy bun, and wore simple jeans and a sweater rather than the uniform he'd expected. "And then," the woman said in a theatrical whisper, the little fox said to the moon. She stopped abruptly upon noticing him. The girls followed her gaze, their smiles fading instantly. "Father!" Penny scrambled to her feet. Paige quickly followed, both straightening their clothes. The woman stood, extending her hand with an easy smile. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm Valentina Mendez, your new housekeeper." Whispers of change. Edmund stared at Valentina's outstretched hand for a moment before giving it a brief, firm shake. "Ms. Mendez, I wasn't aware the housekeeper's duties included story time." "Oh, I finished the evening chores early," Valentina replied, her smile unwavering. The girls mentioned they hadn't heard The Fox and the Moon before, and I couldn't resist sharing it. "It was my favorite as a child." Penny and Paige exchanged nervous glances, their earlier joy evaporating in their father's presence. "I see," Edmund said coolly. "Girls, it's past your bedtime. Please get ready for bed. Miss Harrison will be up shortly." "Actually," Valentina interjected gently, "I've already laid out their pajamas. I can handle their bedtime routine if you'd like." Edmund's eyebrows rose fractionally. This woman had been employed less than a day and was already overstepping her boundaries. Yet something in her confident, warm demeanor made him hesitate to correct her. "Very well," he conceded. "Just this once." The following weeks brought subtle but unmistakable changes to Blackwood Manor. Edmund first noticed it in the twins' appearance. Penny's hair now featured small, colorful clips, while Paige had taken to wearing mismatched socks. Against his better judgment, Edmund said nothing, watching as other changes materialized. The mansion's formal breakfast room was abandoned in favor of the sunny kitchen nook. Fresh flowers appeared throughout the house. Most surprising were the sounds, not just laughter, but music, chatter, and the patter of small feet running down hallways that had been silent for years. One evening, Edmund returned home to find dinner waiting not in the formal dining room, but in the kitchen. "Ms. Mendez, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded, finding Valentina stirring something fragrant at the stove. "The girls and I thought a change might be nice," she explained, seemingly unintimidated by his stern tone. "They mentioned you used to have family dinners in here. Before." Edmund's protest died on his lips. "Before Amelia's illness. Before their world shattered. The dining room is perfectly adequate," he managed. "Adequate isn't always enough, Mr. Blackwood," Valentina replied softly. "Sometimes we need more than adequate. Sometimes we need warmth." That night, Edmund reluctantly ate in the kitchen, watching as Valentina drew the girls into conversation, asking about their day in ways that required more than one-word answers. Penny enthusiastically described a science experiment, while Paige shyly showed a drawing she'd made. Edmund realized he hadn't heard their distinct voices, Penny's animated pitch, Paige's thoughtful murmur, in years. Later that week, Edmund found himself working from home, ostensibly to prepare for an important call. The truth, which he barely admitted to himself, was curiosity. Who was this woman who had so quickly transformed his household? From his study, he observed Valentina through the window as she helped the girls plant marigolds in pots on the terrace. The scene triggered a memory. Amelia on that same terrace, pregnant with the twins, planning a garden that would grow alongside their daughters. That evening, Giles handed Edmund the household accounts for review. "Ms. Mendez has requested additional funds," Giles noted. "For art supplies and books." Edmund frowned. "She should have consulted me first. She attempted to, sir. 3 times. You were unavailable." The rebuke in the normally impassive Giles's tone was unmistakable. Edmund signed the approval without further comment. Days later, Edmund returned home earlier than usual, pausing outside the library when he heard Valentina's voice. "Your mother sounds like she was wonderful," she was saying gently. "She used to call us her little stars," Paige's soft voice replied. "Dad doesn't like when we talk about Mom," Penny added. "It makes him sad." "Sometimes," Valentina said carefully. "Grown-ups don't know how to be sad and still live their lives at the same time. They think they have to choose." Edmund retreated silently, the words following him down the hallway. That night, for the first time since Amelia's death, he opened the photo album she had lovingly curated. The smiling woman in the photos seemed to belong to another lifetime, a vibrant, laughing Amelia holding infant twins, and Edmund with relaxed shoulders and unguarded eyes beside her. The next morning, Edmund found Valentina in the kitchen preparing breakfast. "Ms. Mendez," he began formally, "I believe we need to discuss your role here." Valentina turned, wiping her hands on her apron, expression cautious but resolute. "Of course, Mr. Blackwood. You've made changes, many changes." "I have," she acknowledged without apology. Edmund took a deep breath. "The girls seem happier." For the first time since their initial meeting, Valentina's confident facade softened into surprise, followed by a genuine smile that reached her eyes. They're remarkable children, Mr. Blackwood. They just needed someone to see them, not as reminders of what was lost, but as who they are right now." Edmund nodded slowly, the walls around his heart creaking under the pressure of a truth he'd been avoiding for 3 years. "Perhaps," he said quietly, "we could all use a little more of that." The garden's revival, the conversation in the kitchen marked a turning point. Edmund began arriving home earlier, sometimes joining Valentina and the girls for their afternoon activities. At first, his presence was stiff and uncertain, a silent observer to their easy camaraderie. Gradually, however, the invisible barrier between Edmund and his daughters began to thin. One Saturday morning, Edmund was reviewing contracts in his study when a tentative knock interrupted his concentration. He opened the door to find Penny and Paige standing hand in hand, dressed in matching overalls, their expressions hopeful but hesitant. "Father," Penny began, always the more courageous of the two, "Ms. Valentina says we need a grown-up's help. Is something wrong?" Edmund asked, immediately concerned. Paige shook her head. "We want to fix Mommy's garden." Edmund froze. Amelia's garden at the far end of the property had been abandoned after her death. Too painful a reminder of the future she'd planned, but would never see. "Ms. Valentina says it's sleeping, not dead," Penny explained earnestly. "Like in the fairy tales." Edmund followed the girls outside, where he found Valentina already in the overgrown garden space, wearing gardening gloves and a wide-brimmed hat. She straightened when she saw him, brushing soil from her knees. "The girls have been asking about this space," she said, her tone gentle but direct. "I thought it might be healing for them to bring it back to life. If you approve, of course." Edmund surveyed the wild tangle of what had once been carefully planned flower beds. The gazebo Amelia had insisted on was barely visible beneath climbing vines. For 3 years, he'd given orders that this area be left untouched, a mausoleum to his grief. "We found Mommy's garden notebook," Paige said softly. Holding up a weather-beaten journal Edmund hadn't seen in years, something shifted within him as he looked at his daughter's face, Amelia's eyes, hopeful and earnest, gazing up at him. Would Amelia have wanted this space preserved in grief or reclaimed in joy? "What do we do first?" he asked, his voice rough. The day passed in a blur of activity, clearing weeds, turning soil, discovering perennials that had somehow survived years of neglect. Edmund found himself kneeling in dirt for the first time in decades, following Valentina's gentle instructions alongside his daughters. "These are resilient," Valentina remarked, uncovering a cluster of daylilies. "They've been waiting all this time to bloom again." Edmund caught her gaze over the flowers, understanding the metaphor wasn't just about the plants. As the weeks progressed, the garden restoration became a family project. Edmund adjusted his schedule to have Sundays free, and the 4 of them would work together, following Amelia's notebook plans while adding their own touches. Penny insisted on a butterfly bush while Paige wanted a small pond for frogs. "Amelia would have loved that," Edmund found himself saying one afternoon, surprising himself with how easily her name now came to his lips. Valentina smiled, handing him a trowel. "Tell me about her," and so he did. As they worked side by side, Edmund found himself sharing memories he'd locked away, Amelia's passion for environmental causes, her terrible cooking but remarkable baking, the way she'd dance in the rain. The girls listened wide-eyed, occasionally adding their own fragmented early memories. One evening, after the twins had gone to bed, Edmund found Valentina still in the garden, stringing fairy lights in the restored gazebo. "The girls mentioned Amelia used to read to them out here in the evenings," she explained, "climbing down from her stepladder." "Yes," Edmund nodded, the memory vivid suddenly. "Even when she was ill, she insisted on being carried out here. Said the garden made her feel alive." Valentina studied him in the gathering dusk. "You've been a wonderful father these past few weeks, Edmund. The girls are blooming just like this garden." It was the first time she'd used his given name, and something in her voice, the warmth, the genuine admiration, caught him off guard. In that moment, with fireflies beginning to glow around them and the scent of jasmine heavy in the air, Edmund realized he was seeing Valentina not just as his children's caretaker, but as a woman who had brought life back to all of them. "I've been absent," he admitted, "for years." "You were present in the ways you could be," Valentina said gently. "You provided security, structure, but now you're giving them what they needed most. Your heart." Edmund stepped closer, the intensity of his feelings both terrifying and exhilarating after years of emotional numbness. "And you, Valentina? What have you given us?" Her smile was soft in the twilight. "Permission. To laugh again. To remember with joy instead of just pain. To live fully in the present." Edmund reached for her hand, half expecting her to pull away. Instead, her fingers intertwined with his, warm and steady. They stood together in the revived garden, neither speaking, as stars appeared overhead and new possibilities blossomed in the space between them. Storm clouds, the peaceful rhythm that had developed at Blackwood Manor, was shattered on a crisp autumn morning when a sleek black car pulled into the circular driveway. Edmund, who had taken to having his morning coffee on the terrace with Valentina, immediately recognized the vehicle. "Josephine," he murmured, an undercurrent of tension in his voice. Valentina followed his gaze. "Your mother-in-law?" Edmund nodded grimly. "I wasn't expecting her for another week." Josephine Whitmore emerged from the car with the precise, controlled movements that characterized her every action. At 68, she remained an imposing figure, silver hair immaculately styled, posture rigid, her expression already set in judgment before she'd even reached the front steps. "Edmund?" she greeted coolly as Giles ushered her into the foyer where Edmund waited. Her gaze slid past him to Valentina, who stood a respectful distance away. "And who might this be?" "Valentina Mendez," Edmund replied. "Our housekeeper." Something flickered across Josephine's face. Surprise? Suspicion. Housekeepers generally don't take coffee with the master of the house. "Ms. Mendez has become an integral part of our household," Edmund said, his tone firm despite the discomfort he felt under Josephine's scrutiny. "I see," Josephine replied, in a way that suggested she saw entirely too much. "Where are my granddaughters?" As if summoned, Penny and Paige burst into the foyer, skidding to a halt when they spotted their grandmother. "Girls!" Valentina admonished gently. "What have we said about running indoors?" "Sorry, Val," they chorused before approaching Josephine with more decorum. "Hello, grandmother." Josephine's eyes narrowed at the casual nickname. "Penelope Page, you've grown." She turned to Edmund. "They're not in uniform. Is it a school holiday?" "It's Saturday, Mother Whitmore," Edmund reminded her. "Nevertheless, proper attire instills discipline. Amelia always understood that." Josephine's pointed comment hung in the air. Later that afternoon, Edmund found Josephine in Amelia's garden, surveying the changes with a critical eye. "You've altered it significantly," she observed. "It barely resembles Amelia's vision." "We used her notebooks as a guide," Edmund defended. "The girls wanted to honor her while making it their own." "The girls," Josephine echoed. "Or was it Ms. Mendez's idea?" "I've been watching her, Edmund. She seems to have assumed quite a significant role here," Edmund stiffened. "Valentina has been good for Penny and Paige, and for me." Clearly, Josephine's tone was acid. "Tell me, what do you actually know about this woman? Her background? Her qualifications to essentially mother my daughter's children. Her references were impeccable." "References can be manufactured," Josephine interrupted. "Did you know she was a psychologist? That she surrendered her license 3 years ago after some sort of incident?" Edmund frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I had her investigated, of course. Valentina Mendez, formerly Dr. Valentina Mendez, specialized in grief counseling for children until she abruptly left her practice. There was a confidential settlement involved." Josephine's smile was cold. "Hardly appropriate nanny material, wouldn't you agree?" That evening, Edmund confronted Valentina in the library after the girls were asleep. "You lied about your background," he began without preamble. Valentina closed her book slowly. "I omitted parts of it, yes. Why? What happened that made you leave your practice? Was there misconduct?" Hurt flashed across Valentina's face. "Is that what Josephine told you?" "She mentioned a settlement." Valentina stood, pacing to the window. "There was a family, parents and 2 children. I was treating the children after their father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. I became too involved. When he died, I couldn't maintain professional boundaries. The mother filed a complaint when I continued trying to help the children outside of official channels. She turned to face Edmund, eyes glistening. I didn't harm anyone, Edmund. I just couldn't separate myself from their pain. The board determined I had become emotionally compromised. I surrendered my license voluntarily and agreed to the settlement to spare the family further distress. You should have told me, Edmund said, his voice tight. Would you have hired me if I had? Valentina challenged. A former psychologist with boundary issues seeking work as a housekeeper? Or would you have seen me as someone trying to fix your family without consent? The accusation hit uncomfortably close to home. Were you using psychological techniques on my daughters without my knowledge? I was being human, Edmund, Valentina replied, her voice breaking. Connecting with two little girls who needed warmth and understanding. Sharing stories and laughter with them. Was that manipulative? To care for them as people, not just charges? Edmund ran a hand through his hair, conflicted. Josephine thinks you're trying to replace Amelia. Valentina's expression softened. No one can replace Amelia. Not for you, not for the girls. But her absence left holes in all your hearts. Is it so wrong to try to fill them with new love while still honoring her memory? Before Edmund could respond, Penny's frightened voice called from the doorway. Are you leaving us, Val? They turned to find both twins standing there in their nightgowns, faces pale with fear. Paige was clutching her stuffed rabbit, tears already streaming down her cheeks. Grandmother says you're sending Val away, Penny continued, her voice wobbling. She says Val tricked us. Edmund crossed to his daughters, kneeling before them. No one is sending anyone away tonight. Go back to bed, and we'll talk in the morning. After Valentina had taken the girls back upstairs, Edmund found Josephine waiting in his study. You've made your point, he said wearily. Have I? Josephine arched an eyebrow. Edmund, I'm not your enemy. I want what's best for my grandchildren, for Amelia's children. This woman, whatever her intentions, deceived you. How can you trust her now? Edmund looked at the photograph on his desk. Amelia on their wedding day, radiant with joy. What would she have wanted? Someone to preserve her children in amber, protected but unchanging? Or someone to help them grow even if it meant evolving beyond the plans she'd made? Amelia would have liked her, he said finally. Valentina sees the girls as Amelia did. As individuals, not extensions of ourselves or vessels for our expectations. Josephine's face hardened. I see you've made your choice. I hope, for the girls' sake, it's the right one. It's not about choosing between Amelia's memory and Valentina's presence, Edmund replied. It's about choosing life over grief. I think that's what Amelia would have wanted for all of us. Symphony of Healing. The morning of the twins' 8th birthday dawned bright and clear. Edmund stood in the kitchen doorway, watching as Valentina helped the girls decorate their own cupcakes, all three with matching smears of frosting on their noses. The scene was so far removed from the formal, catered affairs Josephine had insisted upon in previous years that Edmund couldn't help but smile. The past 2 months since Josephine's departure had been a time of rebuilding. After the confrontation in his study, Edmund had asked her to give them space, not a permanent banishment, but a chance to find their own path forward. To her credit, Josephine had respected his request, though her parting words, Amelia deserved better, had haunted him. Those words had prompted a long, difficult conversation between Edmund and Valentina about honesty, intentions, and the complex nature of healing. Valentina had offered to leave if her presence caused more pain than comfort, but the girl's devastation at the mere suggestion had made the decision clear. Daddy, look, Paige called, noticing him in the doorway. I made one for you. Edmund crossed to the kitchen island, examining the lopsided cupcake with its excessive sprinkles and wobbly icing heart. It's perfect, he said sincerely. Valentina wiped flour from her cheek, her smile warm but still carrying traces of uncertainty that had lingered since Josephine's accusations. The party supplies are already in the garden. The guests should arrive at 2. Rather than the formal affairs of previous years, the girls had requested a small gathering with classmates in Amelia's garden. Edmund had agreed immediately, surprising himself with how little the departure from tradition bothered him. As the day progressed, the garden filled with the sounds of childish laughter and games. Edmund found himself participating rather than merely observing, helping with the scavenger hunt, serving cake, even joining an impromptu game of tag that left him breathless but grinning. Late in the afternoon, as the party wound down and guests began to depart, Edmund noticed Valentina standing alone by the gazebo, watching the scene with a mixture of joy and something like longing. He approached quietly, leaning against the railing beside her. "Penny says you've been helping her with a special project," he commented. Valentina nodded. "She wanted to make a memory book for today. For Amelia." "I know." Edmund took her hand gently. "She showed me this morning." "It was beautiful, Valentina. Thank you for helping her find a way to include her mother in today's celebration." Valentina squeezed his fingers. The girls never forgot Amelia, Edmund. They just needed permission to remember her with joy instead of sadness. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Penny's voice called across the garden. "Daddy! Val, come quick! It's happening!" They hurried to where the girls were crouched by the butterfly bush, watching in rapt attention as a chrysalis trembled, its translucent shell splitting to reveal the crumpled wings of a monarch butterfly emerging into the world. "It's beautiful," Paige whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "Is it hurting?" Penny asked, noticing the butterfly's struggle. "No, sweetheart," Valentina explained softly. "The struggle is important. It's how its wings grow strong enough to fly." Edmund met Valentina's gaze over the girls' heads, understanding the metaphor in a way he couldn't have 3 months ago. As dusk fell, the last guests departed. Edmund found Valentina in the kitchen, quietly putting away leftover party supplies. "I have something for you," he said, placing a small wrapped package on the counter. Valentina looked at him questioningly before carefully unwrapping the gift, a silver key on a delicate chain. "It's the key to Amelia's writing desk," Edmund explained. "I found her last journal. She wrote about her hopes for the girls if she couldn't be here, that they would know joy, feel secure in being loved, and have strong women in their lives to guide them." He took a deep breath. "I think she would be grateful it was you." Tears filled Valentina's eyes. "Edmund, I know this has been unconventional," he continued. "Former psychologist becomes housekeeper, helps grieving family heal, falls in love with widower." Valentina's breath caught. "Is that what's happening? We're falling in love?" Edmund reached for her hands. "I think we already have. The question is, what do we do about it?" "The girls already adore you," Edmund finished. "But I understand your concern about boundaries, about moving too quickly." He brushed a curl from her face. "We can take this slowly, define new roles carefully. What matters is that we're doing it together." Valentina leaned into his touch. "There will be challenges. Josephine, we'll come around or she won't," Edmund said firmly. "I spent 3 years letting grief dictate our lives. I won't let fear do the same." A small noise at the doorway made them turn. Penny and Paige stood there in their pajamas, watching with cautious hope. "Are you going to be our new mom?" Penny asked bluntly. Valentina knelt to their level. "No one can replace your mom, loves. She'll always be your mother. But if you're all comfortable with it, I'd like to be another person who loves you very, very much." "Like a bonus mom?" Paige suggested. Valentina smiled through her tears. "Exactly like that." "We'd like that," Penny decided, speaking for both of them as usual. "Dad laughs when you're here. And you make good pancakes," Edmund chuckled, joining them on the floor. "High praise indeed." As they sat together in the kitchen, planning a movie night with popcorn and blanket forts, Edmund felt the last shadows of grief receding. They would never disappear entirely. Amelia would always be a part of their family's story. But now that story had new chapters waiting to be written, filled with laughter, love, and the joy of beginning again. In Amelia's garden outside, the newly emerged butterfly spread its wings for the first time, testing them against the evening breeze before taking flight into the vast open sky.